Hi, my second graders. I heard that you guys had a lot of fun last week with your Morse code activity. I'm so happy to hear that because that means that you're going to like today's activity as well. Let's get started. So, last week we read the story Jack Rabbit McCabe and the Electric Telegraph. And the problem was people needed a quicker way to communicate with each other. I want you to imagine that if this were a true story, it took place hundreds and hundreds of years ago, right? People didn't have iPads or iPhones or even telephones in their own house. So the problem way back then was that people needed a quicker way to communicate with each other. So the electric telegraph was invented so people had a sound device that helped them communicate with each other. What I want you to think about is who was in charge of solving that problem? Who created the electric telegraph? Who created Morse code? What kinds of jobs do these types of people have? These people are engineers. And like we talked about last week, engineers fix, design, or build things to solve problems. Today, what I want to talk about a little bit is the engineering design process, because going forward, you, boys and girls, will be doing engineering projects. So it's important that, like real engineers, you know the special steps you need to take when you start an engineering project. The very first thing you do is ask questions. You're solving a problem, so you need to know what the problem is. Then you imagine how you're going to solve that problem. You might draw pictures, you might come up with ideas in your head, you might have different shapes and sizes of what your invention might look like. So when you imagine, you're brainstorming. Next, you plan. You draw it out, you make a list of materials. Number 4, this is the most exciting step in the engineering design process. This step is called create. And this is when you actually get to create your invention and test it out. Lastly, engineers always go back and improve their inventions or try to make it better. Do you guys think you're ready to be engineers? Do you know all the steps in the engineering design process? Let's see. In your science packet, you will have this worksheet. I think it's the last page, so you could just rip it right out of that packet. And then you'll also need scissors and a glue stick. And why don't you pause the video while you look for those things? Now that you have all of your materials, you can go ahead and cut out on the dotted lines. You're going to cut out each step of the engineering design process and then what those steps mean. I will help you by first telling you the order of these steps. Ask, imagine, plan, create, and improve. Why don't you pause the video so you can glue those words into the correct boxes. Now, look at the description sentences. What would be the very first thing that you do? It would be to think about what you already know and ask lots of questions for your project. Next is imagine. What do you think that means? Do you remember? Look for the sentence that says, draw many pictures and lots of different design ideas. The third step is plan. I want you to look for the sentence that says, decide one design and draw a picture of it. This is something that you will do in your journal when you begin an engineering project. You will plan and design inside of your science journal. Number 4 is create. Find the sentence that says, make a model or prototype of the design. And lastly, number 5 is improve. Find the sentence that says, add or take away from the original design to change it and make it better. When you're done, you can pause this video and glue this worksheet into your science journal so that you always remember the steps of the engineering design process. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about some communication devices that engineers invented throughout the years. So some from long ago and some from today. On the screen, you will see 10 pictures, and they're in random order. And all of these pictures are different communication devices that have been invented by engineers. So we have a smartphone or an iPhone, paper. People used to write messages on paper and communicate that way. Cave paintings, the printing press, which was the first version of a newspaper, the electric telegraph, which you guys learned a little bit about last week, the telephone, the internet, television or TV, the Pony Express, which is like a mail person, but on a pony, not in a car, and the radio. People used to communicate with the radio. So without actually knowing which of these things was invented first and which was invented last, I want you to just take a moment to look at the pictures and make a prediction, make a guess. And then you could press play when you're ready to move on. I'm going to read you this story today. It's a quick nonfiction book about communication long ago and today, and you will learn the correct order of when those communication devices were invented. Communication in our world. People love to find new ways to communicate. Long ago, people used bits of clay to pass on news and keep track of information. They passed messages through facial expressions and by making shapes with their hands. Today, tools like computers send messages across the world. Communication has changed a lot over time. Early people liked to draw. They wrote on cave walls and pots. They drew animals and people. They also painted hieroglyphics. The first letters were made 5,000 years ago. They came from China and Italy. Today, people find stones carved with these old letters. So the very first known communication was cave paintings. Then people started making paper in Europe around 1200. Early books were copied by hand. They cost a lot of money. Johann Gutenberg invented the printing press in 1446. This machine copied typed pages quickly. Some kids began to use books as families could keep books in their homes. Then came moving messages. People first moved mail by hand around 1775. The Pony Express began in the United States in 1860. Riders on horseback delivered mail across the country. People later used boats, trains, and planes. Long ago, it took weeks to get mail over oceans. Now, it takes just a few days with planes. Then was the rise of the telephone and the telegraph. Telephones were invented in the late 1800s. They let voices travel by wires. People could call a doctor, the police, or family members. Whole streets had just one phone number at first. The phone rang in all the houses on the party line. In the early 1900s, many people began to buy radios for their homes. Both adults and kids listened to radio shows for fun. They also listened for news of wars and other important events. In 1921, 14-year-old Philo T. Farnsworth had an idea. His idea used a spot of light. The light made pictures that moved. This led to the first TVs. The information age. Early computers were as big as entire rooms. Smaller home computers were new in the 1970s. The internet became popular in the 1990s. Cell phones soon appeared too. People now communicate every day using computers and smartphones. They use smartphones for calls, sending text messages, and emails, to get information and for fun. Communication in the future. Computers may one day be even tinier than they are today. They could be as small as the head of a pin. New computers already scan eyes and show people's names and information using these scans. People may even use electric pulses in their brains to communicate. The world changes fast. We can only guess how people will communicate in the future. I'm going to read that last sentence again. We can only guess how people will communicate in the future. That last sentence is important because this could be you guys who invent the next communication device. For the rest of science today, my second grade friends, in your Google Slides, you will see that you are going to be sorting the communication devices between long ago and the ones that we use now. Okay, when you open it up, it'll be centered on the slide. You'll need to drag over to the left so that you could see all of those pictures from the book that I just read to you. So you can click on the picture and drag it where you think it belongs. I hope you enjoy this activity. I'll see you next week.